I never imagined I'd walk into hell disguised as a five-star restaurant. But there I was, seated at a dimly lit corner table, my fingers wrapped around a whiskey glass, listening to the sound of my downfall happening 3 tables away. Ugh, Jason's still a secretary? The voice was hers. Emily. My wife, or at least, the woman I thought she was. A chorus of laughter followed. Then a man's voice, deep and arrogant. Brandon. Her new husband. Her upgrade. Come on, babe, he said, smug and loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Let him live his little office fantasy. Some men aren't built for success. My jaw clenched. My fingers dug into the wood of the table. If only they knew. If only they knew who I really was. Because Jason Carter wasn't just some lowly secretary. He wasn't some pitiful ex-husband still crying over his cheating wife. Jason Carter was the CEO. The CEO of the very company they were about to beg for a $100 million contract. And tomorrow, they'd find out. But before we get to that moment, before the delicious satisfaction of justice, let me take you back to where it all began. To the moment my world fell apart. To the moment I found out that Emily Carter was a liar, a fraud, and the worst mistake of my life. It started with a scent. Not just any scent, a scent. Expensive cologne, the kind that clung to silk ties and sweaty skin after a long night of doing things you weren't supposed to. I smelled it on Emily's dress when she walked past me in the hallway, completely oblivious to the fact that I was paying attention. Late meeting ran over, she muttered, not even looking at me. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But something inside me tightened. Emily never had late meetings. And even if she did, she never came home with that look, the one that screamed guilt disguised as exhaustion. I let it slide. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was ignoring the phone. It was just sitting there on the bathroom counter, her screen lighting up as I walked by. A text message. Can't stop thinking about tonight. Same time tomorrow. My stomach twisted. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking, scrolling through messages that confirmed everything I didn't want to believe. Brandon. It had been him for months. The late meetings, the sudden interest in self-care weekends, the extra gym sessions. I should have seen it. I should have seen it. When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her body, hair dripping, I was still holding her phone. What's this? I asked, my voice deathly calm. Her eyes flickered to the screen, and in that split second, I saw it, the hesitation, the panic, the gears turning in her head as she calculated the best way to lie her way out of it. Oh my God, Jason, are you serious? She scoffed, rolling her eyes. You're snooping through my phone now? I didn't say anything. She snatched it out of my hand, shaking her head like I was the one in the wrong. You're being ridiculous. Brandon's just a friend. We were talking about work stuff. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Work stuff? Right. You mean like how he can't stop thinking about tonight? For a split second, she faltered. Then, just like that, she was on the attack. Oh, so now I'm not allowed to have male friends, she snapped. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like some insecure little boy. I should have yelled. I should have raged. But all I did was stare. Because that was the moment I knew. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even trying to come up with a good excuse. Emily Carter was a liar. A cheat. And the worst part? She didn't even respect me enough to pretend otherwise. I clenched my jaw. My mind was already spinning. How long? Where? How many times? But in the end, none of it mattered. Because the woman standing in front of me, the woman I had built a life with, wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never had been. And that realization? That was the moment Jason Carter died. The old Jason, anyway. The new one? The new one was about to make them both regret everything. Emily stood there, towel slipping slightly, arms crossed, waiting for me to break. She wanted me to lash out, to scream, to beg for an explanation so she could twist it into my fault. That was her game. Manipulation, gaslighting, anything to avoid responsibility. But I wasn't playing. I stepped past her, slow, deliberate. She let out an annoyed sigh, probably thinking I was being dramatic or immature. She had no idea I was already making my next move. Fine, she said, rolling her eyes. Give me the silent treatment. Real mature, Jason. I grabbed my keys. I'll be back. Where are you going? I didn't answer. Just walked out, shutting the door behind me. The second I was in my car, I let the mask slip. My hands gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, my breath coming sharp and uneven. Betrayal didn't hit you all at once. It seeped in, twisting like a knife. Memories flooded back. Late nights waiting for her to come home. The way she'd laugh at her phone, quickly locking the screen when I got too close. The sudden disinterest in me. I had given her everything, and she had given herself to him. I drove aimlessly, mind racing. I could have confronted Brandon right then, could have gone straight to his place and knocked him flat on his smug, cheating face. But that was too easy, too predictable. No, I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. The kind that would destroy every excuse she had. So, I did what any man in my position would do. I called in a favor. One of my closest friends, Matt, worked in private security. He didn't ask many questions, just got things done. When I called and told him I needed someone followed, he didn't hesitate. Send me the details, he said. I'll get you everything you need. By the next evening, I had more than enough. Photos, timestamps, even a video of Emily stepping out of a hotel, adjusting her dress while Brandon followed close behind. She didn't even look guilty, didn't even care. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling, feeling everything and nothing at the same time. I wasn't just angry. I was done. The next morning, I packed a bag. Emily barely noticed, too busy on her phone, probably texting him. When I reached the door, she finally looked up. Where are you going? I turned to her, calm, unreadable. Out, I said. For how long? She pressed, frowning like I was inconveniencing her. For as long as I feel like. She scoffed. God, you're so dramatic. If this is about that stupid text, I already told you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she really thought I was still that stupid. That week, she had no idea. No idea that I wasn't just walking out of that door, I was walking out of her life. And when she finally realized it, it would already be too late. Days passed, and I didn't answer her calls. At first, she tried playing the concerned wife, leaving voicemails about how she was worried and how we needed to talk things through. Then, when I didn't bite, she switched tactics. You're being childish, Jason, one message sneered. Running away doesn't change anything. Grow up. Then came the guilt tripping. You're really going to throw away everything we built? Over nothing? Nothing. That's what she called it. And just like that, any lingering doubt, any small part of me that wanted to believe she regretted what she did, disappeared. I focused on my work, on my empire. Because what Emily never knew, what she never cared to notice, was that I had been building something much bigger than she ever imagined. She thought I was just some secretary working a dead-end job, barely scraping by. That's what I let her believe. In reality, I was the owner, the silent force behind one of the fastest-growing investment firms in the country. I had built it from the ground up, keeping my name off everything, letting others take the public credit while I pulled the strings. Why? Because power was best wielded in secret. And soon, Emily and her new boy toy would feel just how much power I had. The day it all came crashing down on them started like any other. I was in my office when Matt called. You're gonna love this, he said, amusement clear in his voice. Hit me. Guess who just walked into the boardroom, ready to close a $100 million deal with your company? I leaned back, smiling for the first time in weeks. Let me guess. Brandon and his lovely, conniving wife. I chuckled. Of course. Emily, always so confident, so sure of herself, probably thinking she had won. She had no idea that the CEO they were about to beg for a signature was the same pathetic secretary she had been mocking just nights before. Send them in, I said. And then, I sat back and waited. Because today was the day I got my revenge. The doors swung open, and they walked in like they owned the place. Brandon, all smug confidence, his overpriced suit stretched over a frame that thought hitting the gym 3 times a week made him powerful. Emily, right beside him, her hand resting on his arm, wearing the kind of dress that screamed I upgraded. I didn't stand right away. I let them walk closer, let them see only the back of my chair, my fingers tapping lazily against the polished wood of the conference table. Brandon was too focused on impressing the board members to notice me at first. He cleared his throat, flashing that practiced, CEO smile. Gentlemen, I know we've been going back and forth on this, but I think today we can finalize this deal. We're looking forward to a very profitable partnership. Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the room. This is the best decision for both parties, she chimed in, her voice dripping with fake polish and charm. I smiled. She still hadn't noticed. Brandon pulled out the contract and slid it forward. Now, if we can just get your CEO's signature, we can make this official. Silence. Then, slowly, I turned my chair. Emily's eyes met mine, and everything stopped. For a full 3 seconds, her expression didn't change. Her brain refused to process what was in front of her. But then, recognition. Her face paled. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Brandon, oblivious, kept talking. We're expecting great things from, and he saw where she was looking. He followed her gaze. Right to me. His smile vanished. You. He muttered. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Good to see you again, Brandon. My voice was calm, measured. I wanted him to feel it, the weight of what was about to happen. Emily swallowed hard, recovering faster than him. Jason, what are you doing here? Her voice wobbled just slightly. She was already trying to put the pieces together. I tilted my head. Oh, you mean in my office? At my company. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. As the CEO? Brandon's face drained of all color. No, that's not. There must be some mistake. I gestured toward the contract. You wanted the CEO's signature, right? I picked up the pen, turning it over in my fingers. Well, you're looking at him. Silence. Absolute, perfect silence. Emily's breathing hitched. She wasn't stupid. She was realizing, all at once, how badly she had miscalculated. Brandon, on the other hand, tried to recover. He straightened, forcing a laugh. Well, I guess congratulations are in order. You must have recently been promoted. I smiled. Oh no, I founded this company years ago. I let the words hang between us before adding, guess Emily never mentioned that, huh? His jaw clenched. He turned to her, his voice tight. You told me he was just a secretary. Emily looked at me with something I had never seen from her before, fear. I leaned back in my chair. Now, about that contract. I picked up the papers, flipping through them lazily. $100 million is a lot of money. I assume you'd want me to trust the people I'm doing business with. My eyes flicked to Emily. Trust is important, don't you think? She flinched. Brandon cleared his throat. Look, Jason, let's be professional here. This deal is good for both our companies. His voice was shaking now. He knew he was losing. I tapped the pen against the table. You're right. Business is business. Then I grinned. But see, I have a strict policy. I let the tension build. I could see the sweat forming at Brandon's hairline. The way Emily gripped his arm tighter, nails digging into his sleeve. I don't do business with snakes. And then, without breaking eye contact, I ripped the contract in half. Brandon's mouth dropped open. Emily let out a small, strangled gasp. Brandon started, his voice rising. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Oh, I do, I said, standing up. I'm making sure neither of you ever gets a dime from me. Ever. Emily's mask slipped. Jason, wait. I turned my back on them, walking toward the door. Before I left, I glanced over my shoulder. Enjoy your new life, Emily. I smirked. Oh, and Brandon? He swallowed. I winked. Try to keep an eye on your wife's phone. And with that, I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own betrayal. The second I stepped out of that room, I felt it, the weight lifting. Months of lies, of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I had been the problem. It all burned away in that moment. Emily and Brandon had played their little game, convinced they were winning. But they didn't know they were sitting at my table, playing by my rules. I walked down the hallway, passing employees who had no idea their boss had just shredded a $100 million deal for revenge. Matt was waiting near the elevators, arms crossed, grinning. Man, I wish you let me record that. I chuckled, feeling the tension finally leave my body. Their faces were enough. He smirked. So, what now? Now? That was a damn good question. For the first time in years, I had nothing tying me down. No wife waiting at home. No toxic relationship draining the life out of me. I was free. But I wasn't done yet. You still got those guys at the finance department? I asked. Matt's grin widened. Oh yeah. You want me to dig? I nodded. Every dirty detail. I want to know exactly how deep Brandon's debts go. How many investors are counting on this deal to save his ass? Matt clapped a hand on my shoulder. This is gonna be fun. I stepped into the elevator, exhaling slowly. The doors slid shut, and as I watched my reflection in the mirrored walls, I realized something. I wasn't the man Emily had left. I was someone far more dangerous. And she was about to find out just how bad she screwed up. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, Matt had everything on Brandon. The guy was drowning in debt, barely keeping his company afloat. That $100 million deal? It wasn't just a big contract. It was the only thing standing between him and complete financial ruin. Without it, Brandon was finished. I sat in my office, sipping my coffee, scrolling through the reports Matt sent over. Emily had really traded down. She left a man who had built an empire in secret for a fraud barely holding his business together. And now, they were both sinking. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Emily. I smirked and let it ring. She tried again. And again. By the fourth call, I finally picked up. Jason, she breathed, her voice soft, like she thought she could still play me. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pin between my fingers. Oh? About what? A pause. About yesterday. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch until she finally cracked. Look, I know you're upset, she continued, switching tactics. But let's be mature about this. You had no right to sabotage Brandon's deal like that. I chuckled. There it was. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to blame me. I had no right? I repeated, amused. That's funny. I don't remember either of you having a problem taking advantage of me when you thought I was just a secretary. Emily let out a frustrated sigh. Jason, don't be petty. You owe me a conversation at least. I don't owe you, I cut in, my voice turning cold. I gave you years of my life, and you threw them away like they meant nothing. Now you want to talk? Now that your little safety net is gone. Jason, please, she whispered. Brandon's company, it's in trouble. He needs this deal. I grinned. There it was. She wasn't calling for closure. She wasn't calling because she regretted what she did. She was calling because she was scared. She had left me, mocked me, betrayed me, and now, when she needed help, I was supposed to save her? I let out a slow breath. Let me make something clear, Emily. Whatever happens to you and Brandon, I don't care. Jason. I hung up, and just like that, she was nothing to me. But the show wasn't over. Matt texted me 2 hours later. Brandon's investors just found out about the failed deal. Panic mode activated. He's trying to set up a meeting with new backers. Should I make that difficult? I smiled. It was time to make sure Brandon lost everything. Brandon's downfall was like watching a slow-motion car crash. Painful, inevitable, and absolutely satisfying. By the end of the week, his company was in freefall. Investors were pulling out left and right. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of mismanagement, debts, failed deals. And me? I just sat back and enjoyed the show. Emily tried calling a few more times, but I didn't bother answering. She sent texts instead, switching between begging and accusing. Jason, please, I just want to talk. We can fix this. You're being cruel. You were never like this before. Is this really who you become? I laughed at that one. Who I'd become? No, Emily. This was who I'd been all along. I had just wasted too much time pretending otherwise. Matt kept feeding me updates, and each one was better than the last. By Monday, Brandon was desperate. He had one last meeting lined up, one final chance to keep his company from collapsing. A meeting with one of my subsidiaries. He had no idea. I made sure of it. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at the office early. The trap was set. My people were ready. Brandon walked in, trying to play it cool, but I could see it in his face. He knew this was his last shot. Emily was with him. She looked different. The confidence she carried before was gone. She wasn't smiling. Her makeup was perfect, her dress expensive, but her eyes? Desperate. I let them sit in the waiting room for 30 minutes. Let them sweat. Then, finally, I had my assistant call them in. They stepped into the boardroom, expecting to meet some unknown executive. And instead, they saw me. Brandon stopped dead in his tracks. Emily gasped. No. I leaned back in my chair, clasping my hands in front of me. Surprised? Brandon's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted to Emily, realizing, too late, that she had never told him who actually owned this company. She looked sick. I gestured to the seat across from me. Go ahead, Brandon. Pitch me. His jaw clenched. This isn't funny, Jason. I raised an eyebrow. Who's joking? You wanted an investment, right? I smirked. Convince me. I could see it. The rage, the humiliation. He didn't want to beg me for anything, but he had no choice. So he did what cowards do. He swallowed his pride and started talking. His pitch was terrible. Rushed, sloppy. I barely listened. Instead, I watched Emily. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. And for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Regret. I let Brandon finish. Then, I exhaled and stood up. Thanks for your time, I said. But I'm not interested. Brandon's eyes widened. You didn't even. I cut him off with a smirk. I just wanted to see you crawl. He turned bright red. You piece of... I didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, I turned to Emily. You made your choice, I said quietly. And now, you get to live with it. She didn't speak, didn't argue, just stood there, realizing that the man she thought would save her was just as screwed as she was. And me? I walked out of that room, a free man. The aftermath was glorious. Brandon's company collapsed within 2 weeks. Investors sued, his assets were frozen, and his reputation? Destroyed. The media feasted on the story, a once promising entrepreneur drowning in debt, betrayed by his own arrogance. Emily? She vanished. No more calls. No more texts. But I knew she wasn't gone for good. Not yet. And sure enough, a month later, it happened. I was leaving the office late when I saw her. Standing by my car, arms crossed, dressed in something a little too tight, a little too desperate. I almost laughed. She had that same fake sweetness in her eyes, the one she used when she wanted something. But this time, it wasn't working. Jason, she breathed, stepping closer. Can we talk? I leaned against the car, arms crossed. Talk? I repeated, amused. You had a lot to say when you were laughing at me in that restaurant. What changed? She bit her lip, shifting. I made a mistake. I smirked. No S star dot. She exhaled sharply. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought, she swallowed. I thought I wanted something different. But he wasn't. He wasn't you. I raised an eyebrow. You mean he wasn't rich? Her face twisted at that, but she didn't deny it. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. You're unbelievable. Jason, please. She grabbed my arm, her fingers soft, her voice syrupy sweet. I miss you. I miss us. I stared at her for a long moment. And then, I laughed in her face. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a full, deep, uncontrollable laugh. The kind that made her eyes widen in shock, her cheeks flush with embarrassment. You actually think I'd take you back? I said, still grinning. After everything? Jason, we had years together, she whispered. That has to mean something. I leaned in close, just enough for her to hope. Then I smiled. It means I wasted my time. Her face crumbled. I pulled my arm from her grip, unlocked my car, and got in. Before I drove off, I rolled down the window and gave her one last look. Enjoy your new life, Emily. I smirked. Hope it was worth it. Then, I drove away, and for the first time in years, I felt free.